Hi, my name is Dr. Don Wicker, and we're going to continue our lecture series on organizational behavior. Today is lecture series number 11, and our topic is Managing Conflict and Negotiating Effectively. Today's topics that we're going to cover are, we're basically going to look at the basic levels of conflict in organizations. We're going to explain 5 interpersonal conflict handling strategies. We're also going to look at core stages, strategies, and influence in negotiating. And we're going to wrap that up with several unique aspects and recommendations for negotiating across cultures. Levels of conflict in organizations. There are 4 different levels if you think about it. You have the intergroup conflict, intra-group conflict, interpersonal conflict, and intrapersonal conflict. What do all those mean? Basic types of interpersonal conflict. You have the approach conflict. You have the avoidance conflict, and you have the approach-avoidance conflict. Let's take a look at the approach conflict. What does that mean? Well, an individual must choose between 2 or more alternatives. And when you're talking about the avoidance conflict, well, an individual must choose between 2 or more alternatives, each of which is expected to have a negative outcome. Approach-avoidance conflict, an individual must decide whether to do something that is expected to have both positive or negative outcomes. Conditions that increase the intensity of interpersonal conflict. What are the conditions that increase the intensity? Well, you have several realistic alternatives are available for handling the conflict. You have positive and negative consequences of alternatives that are roughly equal. And finally, you have sources of conflict when it's important to that individual. Those are the conditions that increase the intensity of interpersonal conflict. Interpersonal conflict, role conflict. You have the intra-sender role conflict and you have the inter-sender role conflict. First of all, the intra-sender role conflict is different messages and pressures from a single member of the role set are incompatible. In the inter-sender role conflict, that's messages and pressures from one role sender oppose them from one or more other senders. Let me restate that. Messages and pressures from one role sender oppose those from one or more other senders. So when you think about the intra-sender role conflict, that's what you have. Interpersonal role conflict. You have the inter-role conflict and you have the person-role conflict, where the inter-role conflict is the role and pressures associated with membership in one group are incompatible with those stemming from membership of other groups. And the person-role conflict is basically role requirements are incompatible with the focal person's own attitude, values, or views. Intra-group conflict. Intra-group conflict. Well, dispute among some or all of a group's members, which often affect the group's dynamic and effectiveness. Often problems in family-run businesses among family members. Discussions of developing teams could be an intra-group conflict. Intergroup conflict, diversity-based. Of course, when you think about intergroup conflict and diversity-based, you think about religion, race, gender, anything dealing with a diverse background. Avoiding style, perhaps used when issues of minor or passing importance, insufficient information on effectively deal with conflict, and low power relative to the other party. Others can more effectively resolve the conflict more effectively. Forcing style, when is this used? Well, emergencies requiring quick action. Unpopular action must be taken for long-term organization effectiveness and survival. And self-protective action is needed. So when you think about self-protective action, you think about a forced style. Accommodating styles. Well, they're used when the need to diffuse a potential explosive emotion, conflict situation, or a short run needed to harmonize or avoid disruption, or when conflict is primarily based on personality that cannot be easily resolved. That's when you need accommodating styles. Collaborating styles. When do you need collaborating styles? Well, when you need high level of cooperation is needed, when sufficient parity exists in power and conflict, and potential for mutual benefits, especially over the long run, and sufficient organizational support to take the time and energy for collaborations to occur. Compromising style. When is that used? Well, the agreement enables each party to better off, or at least not worse off, than without an agreement, or achieving a total win-win agreement is not possible, or conflicting goals block agreement on one person's proposal. That's when you need a compromising style. Distributive negotiation strategy. When do you want to use this? If you look at our chart, we have different categories. I want it all, time wrap, good cop, bad cop. That's basically when you use a distributive negotiation strategy, when you have those factors involved. Integrative negotiation strategies. When do you use integrative negotiating strategy? Well, separate the people from the problem, focus on interests, not positions, invent options for mutual gain. Those are just some of the reasons that you use an integrative negotiation strategy, and you can tell that from our chart. 4 influences on negotiation strategies. What are the 4 influences? Well, think about this. You have attitudinal structuring, you have interorganizational negotiations, and you have negotiator's dilemma, and you have mediation. So those are the 4 influences on negotiating strategies. Key tasks for a mediator. Of course, you may think about a mediator in a divorce proceeding, but it's basically the same principle. Ensuring mutual motivation, achieving a balance in situational power, coordinating confrontation efforts, promoting openness and dialogue, and of course, maintaining an optimal level of tension. And our last subject is negotiating across cultures. What is negotiating across cultures? Well, you have 2 common perspectives. Totally different situations from one country to another. Essentially the same as negotiating domestically. However, you have 2 different types of environments. Both perspectives are inadequate, if not wrong. Culturally, differences are critical because you could be wrong in one country versus being correct in another. Of course, we have different negotiators across cultures. You think about negotiating attitude, win-win, win-lose situation, personal style, formal versus informal. You have communication style, direct versus indirect, and you have agreement form, general to specific. Cross-culture emotional intelligence for negotiators. Think about being a negotiator. You have intelligence, of course, self-awareness, self-motivation, social empathy, and social skills. Of course, with all these skills, that helps to build a better negotiator. And that's basically all we have for lecture series number 11. We want to thank you for listening to us again. And again, our topic was managing conflict and negotiating effectively.